Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for day 3. I do see a lot of familiar faces who were here earlier in the week. So, really, this is building on a lot of those things that we've already kind of talked about, right? So earlier in this week, we talked about getting yourself organized, getting your metadata in place, making sure that you were registered with the right organizations. The industry has a variety of different agencies that support songwriters and the publishing world. We had the MLC here. Of course, we've also talked about PROs and so on. And one of the reasons why, when we were thinking about how to structure this week, one of the reasons why we wanted to focus on this topic is because I know that I've personally seen with artists who have come to me. One, they might not be thinking like a songwriter or not even realizing that they are songwriters. That's one thing. But also, I see a lot of times where there's been some element of focus on how much money they've been spending. They maybe have been spending money on a producer or they've been spending money on marketing and stuff like that. Haven't necessarily been thinking of those as expenses. And the flip side of that is that they're not necessarily tracking income, right? They're not tracking the royalties that are coming into them, where those royalties are coming from, and so on. So when we were structuring this week, we really wanted to sort of finalize this with like put on your CEO hat, right? If you're an independent artist or an artist manager who's managing artists or some other representative, you are running a business, you're an entrepreneur. Everybody here on this panel is also an entrepreneur in some way. And I'll let them introduce momentarily, but that's really what the thought is today, is if you want to have a sustainable music career, you do have to think of it as a business, and that involves thinking about all ends of where your revenue is going out and coming back in. So with that, I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves so they can please tell me who you are and how you provide these opportunities and assist music artists and songwriters. So I'm going to start with no particular order. Aichelle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aichelle. I am the greatest music administrator this side of heaven. I ensure that music creatives understand the business of music, how they get paid, which organizations they are getting paid from, and help them secure their musical legacy.
Amazing. And Aichelle, you're in Wisconsin, right? Because I think
I am in
got someone in the
Wisconsin.
chat also in Wisconsin. So you
I
got
saw I saw Lake. I booked Lake before.
even better. Amazing. Okay. Um, I guess I'm going alphabetically now. Alyssa.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alyssa Byrne. I am the Senior Manager of Writer and Publisher Relations at TuneCore. I swear I will not sell you TuneCore while I'm here. I'm just here to talk about the business in general. But I also founded my company earlier this year, All Black Management, and I help our artist Z Machine with all of his business and stuff. So I think, like a lot of people here probably have a really good balanced perspective of like what exists on the corporate side, and then also like what it is to be an artist and what it is to run that business. And I really love it, and I love music, and it's kind of a dream to be doing this. So yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. And then last but by no means least, Lisa.
Hello, everyone. It's good
Emily.
to have this third
Emily
day with
Darcy.
everyone. I think Chantel is off mute, so all good, sis, all good. Lisa Robinson. I am the CEO and founder of Adagio Music Consulting, which I launched in July. I have a nearly 30-year music publishing career with a focus primarily in income tracking. I have recovered along with my teams at numerous publishers. I've recovered millions, probably over, I think last count, I was at over 25 million in royalties that were either uncollected or underreported. So I am very familiar with the ins and outs of publishers, from the big ones to the small ones to administrators. So I'm just glad everyone's here, and I hope you leave here with some education as well as some expectations. So thank you, Big Ass Kids, for having us. We appreciate it.
Amazing. So let's start with some basics here. As a music artist or as a songwriter, the financial side can feel very daunting, right? So what are some of the first steps with getting organized from a, music finances, where your finances are standpoint? Whichever one of you would like to step in on that.
Well, I mean, I think this might sound like elementary, but it's understanding what they even are in the first place, right? So I think a lot of the time, like the conversations that I have very commonly with clients are, oh, I'm good, I don't need publishing, I have BMI. And we all, I'm sure we've heard that. Lisa, I see you nodding big time, Aichelle as well. So, you know, understanding not only like how to get things, but where, like what those things are to begin with. So like really establishing a solid foundational like education on what's a PRO, what's a CMO, like all of the different kinds of organizations that are collecting royalties, the differences between sound recordings and compositions, and what royalties come from what source, not only, you know, globally, but what asset, right? So I think that's a good place to start.
I agree. And that actually reinforces a lot of what's been said earlier this week. We will be sending around some materials for people to review, just to remember your sound recording and your musical work generate different kinds of copyright, different kinds of royalties, and those also need to come in through different channels. So, you know, please feel free to review some of the things we talked about earlier this week as well in relation to that. Aichelle, did you have something you wanted to add?
I did this year because I was instructed in.
Yes, I was also going to say, make sure that you have documents like your split sheet, feature artist agreements, any producer agreements. Make sure that you have those and you actually read them and not just have them because you should have them. You want to actually read them so that you can properly credit and disperse royalties, percentages, all of those things.
Absolutely. So, and I'm going to kind of target you a little bit here, Lisa, on this one with your vast experience of tracking some of this down. So let's say that an artist has done some of this research and they're understanding the different avenues in which their royalties and other revenue may be channeling through to them. How can they even know if they have unclaimed royalties? Like, I figured out what I'm supposed to be getting, but where do I even start?
Well, first of all, always assume your statement is wrong. That's what has worked for me throughout my decade-long career in income tracking. And let me go back to say, and this reinforces what we've had access to these past 2 days. Just going back to Alyssa and Aichelle, education. There is no excuse for you not to know who does what, who provides what, and when they provide it. There are websites. There's the Donald Passman book that you should have. I think he's up to the yellow cover or the orange cover. There are just things you can educate yourself. And if you don't feel like you have the time to do it, then you hire someone who can. And I know we're going to touch upon that. Getting back, Natalie, to your question again, just assume that your statement is wrong. There is a lot of money that's being left on the table. We talked about the past couple of days, well, Monday on metadata. So don't assume that because you got a check for $500 that check is right. You look at it. I often call income tracking a real-time audit. You want to look at it and assume and scrutinize and make sure that T's are dotted, you know, T's are crossed and I's are dotted, meaning should I have gotten 50% on that song or should I have gotten 5%? Just essentially scrutinizing the information you get. What we would do for income tracking is essentially get a statement and compare it to all your metadata. So the documents that Aichelle is talking about, making sure everything lines up, making sure that, yes, maybe I was supposed to get $5,500 on that song, but I got 500, but why is that? And then answering it. It is not always a simple, hey, my name was misspelled, or it's the wrong rate. It could also be, hey, there's money sitting for you at that pay source. And when I refer to pay sources, I'm talking about the ASCAPs, the PROs, the labels, the CMOs. There may be something sitting at that CMO that you're unaware of, and you need a person who has a connection who could dial up someone and simply say, hey, Aichelle wrote this song. She should have gotten 5,500. Why did she get 500? Oh, because we have $5,000 sitting for her because it's a legal dispute, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say this because I can go on and I won't, but it's kind of like when you get a bill, right? You get a bill. If you got a bill for $5,000, right, Chantel, you're going to say, what's this bill for? I got to check this bill out. What are they talking? Do the same thing when you get your statements. I got a statement and I hope you get one for 5,000. I have a statement for 5,000. But let me take a look at this. Were all the pay sources reported? My song is doing great on the radio. Do I have radio performance? This song was just on a set list at a major top 200 concert. Was that reported? and just really going through everything and scrutinizing it, making sure everything's in order. But you will not fail if you always assume it's wrong. Do not rely on the pay sources to pay you what you should be properly compensated. If they did, there would be no need for people like Aichelle, Alyssa, and myself.
Right. And I'm going to add an example to that as she pulls, because Alyssa, you're at TuneCore, right? And so TuneCore does offer certain services such as, taking care of your publishing registration with the MLC. And I know that I've spoken with people who don't realize that they've even let TuneCore do that, nor do they realize that that's where the money is going to come from. It's not going to come from the MLC. It's going to come via their statement through TuneCore. I don't know if you want to add anything. I know you said you weren't going to talk about TuneCore.
Sure. No, I mean,
It's
I'm not going to
topical.
plug the brand, but like, I'll tell you what we do.
Right.
No, what I say on, like, when I have one-on-one conversations with new clients and they ask me like, what even is publishing? Like, the thing I always say is publishing is complicated on purpose. And that purpose is to ask you out of your own money. So it's like very old school, like the roots of everything, even like why it's called publishing has to do with like 1920s, like printing and, stuff like that. So there's a lot of like 2025ing we can do. However, so as a publishing administrator, which is different from a co-publisher, different from a typical, like a regular publisher, which takes an ownership percentage of your copyrights, we let our clients keep 100% of their copyrights and just basically do the paperwork, right? It's kind of the easiest way to understand it. So in that, we have a pretty much like 95% direct global collection network, meaning that we register songs on behalf of our songwriters. So like, maybe I should back up. TuneCore is a music distributor, meaning that's how you get your music on Spotify, we know that. But we also have publishing administration, right? So it's a different service that we offer. So when it comes to collecting your royalties from your PRO, the MLC, right, in the States, other organizations are about 240 to 260 on a given year around the world. So we're able to register directly with all of these different organizations such that you can pull everything back into one nice statement, which should be audited. Lisa's absolutely correct. So I think one of the things that I wanted to mention is like, yes, the MLC revenue that we would bring in is like, instead of you going and directly registering on your own with all of these different organizations, which is a job in and of itself, right? An administrator, whether it's us or anyone else, makes it easier for you to focus on the creative stuff and not worry about making sure that it's at least registered properly. So the revenue that we would bring in would be, instead of somebody going and registering on their own, we do that on their behalf with the MLC, with your PRO, which also kind of surprises people sometimes. And the reason I want to say that is because at your PRO, you have a writer share and a publisher share. And I think that's maybe lesser understood in some circles. So your writer share, a publishing administrator won't touch. That is something that you continue to collect directly through your own PRO. But your publisher share is something that you can allocate an administrator to collect on your behalf and make sure that money is coming into. Because if you don't have your own publishing entity, you're not going in and making sure and kind of scrutinizing like what should be paid on either side. It can be really difficult to make sure that you're capitalizing and maximizing that income. So that's something that we're able to provide to songwriters in addition to education and all the other fun things we do.
But this is definitely something where people need to be aware of where that's coming from, because
Absolutely.
again, a lot of people forget where they've given the administrative abilities to, and so therefore they're not checking that statement. They're not looking at the statement, to Lisa's point, and saying, is this, what is this? Is this my distribution royalties, or is it coming in because TuneCore registered with the MLC or PRO on my behalf? So those are really critical details that you should be aware of, because you wouldn't, if you got random money in your bank account, you should question it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because the other thing too is the societies have the ability to debit those funds later on. So if they discover that they've made an incorrect payment, right, and maybe you have the same first name, or you have a similar song title to someone else, or, how many songs are out there called like I'm in love, right? Like, these mismatches happen, and that's a reality of the industry. It's, we have to deal with that. But as an administrator, one of our jobs is to make sure that we're catching those things. We're proactively looking for mismatches. We're like identifying opportunities so that you don't have this big balance of like, oh, I usually get $200 a quarter, but I just got $5,000. Awesome. I'm doing so well, this and that. When in 6 months that might be debited, and that's a painful thing to go through. So like understanding how the societies work, how they pay through, how they're able to kind of recollect those funds if they're inaccurate, all of that is important to just be aware of, I think.
And can I just add, Alyssa used the P word other than publishing, proactive.
Yeah.
Royalty collection and income tracking are not the same thing. So when you hear royalty collection a lot, right, that means royalties came through or didn't to the pay source. And again, I'm going to keep using pay source. And then royalties went to you, but that doesn't mean what was sent to you was correct, to Alyssa's point. There could be an error, or it could be fine, that as well. And that's what we'll talk about later. Expectations come into play, but don't assume your administrator or business manager, even though they should, is going to be doing proactive income tracking on your behalf. And if you are at a certain administrator, they may just be doing the bigger, I hate to say it, but the bigger known artists who are more likely to make us think about it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Royalty collection and income tracking are not the same thing. The difference being, to Alyssa's point, proactiveness. That's the difference.
Absolutely. So I'm actually going to use that as a perfect dovetail into this question that's sitting in the chat right here. And I'm going to direct this one towards Aichelle. So how do you go about having that conversation with producers and collaborators on splits? Now, I'm going to say that this is a proactive thing, but the question is really, how do you stop and discuss those splits without it feeling like an awkward interaction when you're in the middle of your creative flow? So, Aichelle, what do you think?
Just as truthful as I can be, you just stop and say, hey, do everybody in this room got their IPIs or their publishers? Or do you mind if we start this split sheet so at the end we can put everybody information and we can all walk out with them? As a music artist, I know when you get in the groove, you like, I don't want to disrupt that because everybody in here is in the groove. You don't want to be that one person to talk about it, but we've seen countless number of people wishing they would have talked about it during that time. A perfect example is the people that just did the urbanized happy birthday song. It was like a collective of people. They were in there recording. Everybody's having a good time. And one of the people uploaded it on TikTok and it went viral. And now they're trying to figure out who owns what or who should be getting what from just having a good vibe session. So I would say, while you're in there, just ask a quick question. Hey, who all has their IPIs? Or do y'all mind if we put our names and stuff on this split sheet so at the end, it could just flow freely?
Absolutely. And it's so much better to do it as quickly as possible. I think I said it the other day, like, don't wait until the viral moment has happened. Proactive is a wonderful word. Thank you, Lisa. Like, be prepared, because fortune favors the prepared, luck favors the prepared, whatever the terminology you want to use is. But ultimately, you're hoping for that viral moment. And when you've got everything in place, you're ready for it. So once you've gone viral, you can be like, I'm just going to enjoy it. I don't have to scramble. Right. Okay. So we've talked about sort of taking care of assets, owning, registering, your metadata and so on. So why should artists and songwriters really look at their music catalog like a long-term investment, though? Because, we've talked a little bit about your more immediate income, but what happens in 10 years, 15 years, then what? Lisa, I can see the wheels are turning. So what you got?
I love this. Like I said, I've been around a while, probably older than most people on this call. All good. When I started income tracking, it was still CDs were around. Yes, those things that kids think are DVDs or coasters. So yes, I always was amazed by those artists / songwriters who always had their ducks in a row. And we're talking about the Lionel Richies, we're talking about the Diane Warrens, we're talking about Jay-Z. This is a business. And so I see all the questions, but how do you ask somebody for splits? How do you do this? What would Lionel Richie do? What would Beyonce do? Publishing, to me, I've always been so proud of being part of publishing compared to labels. No shade to labels, but publishing is going to make money for a long time. That's why you can hear a song that came out decades ago now being used in a commercial, now being covered, now being used in a soundtrack. I mean, now being used on TikTok, right? That money is going to flow forever. I mean, I used to see the checks for Bruno Mars, for Neptunes, Pharrell Williams before he became Pharrell, and it's like, oh my God, there is money and this creativity. And you all deserve the right to be properly compensated for that. So to Natalie's question, creativity never dies. Art doesn't die. The popularity of it maybe ebbs and flows, but you want to make sure you're in a position to leverage and maximize when it's flowing and it's flowing properly. So I am not a creative at all. I'm more the business side, but I am amazed at people who are on top of their game and those who aren't, because there's no excuse not to be, and you can be leaving money on the table. So to wrap it up, yes, your money, what does Beyonce say? Her grandkids, great grandkids are going to be eating for you. You know, you can set up future generations with something you simply do now. That's the beauty of publishing. So I think, yeah, I think people who are on top of their game with their publishing, it's evident, and you need to be mindful of that. And you're here, so that's a good start. That's a good start.
That's a great start. And I will say that maybe a lot of people may not even realize it. You know, when you think about performance, and we were talking about sync yesterday, if your music gets put into a film, every single time that film gets shown and broadcast globally, right, that can be generating royalties for you. So you could potentially be you know, you think about films that become classics and they're being, you know, played over and over years and years and years from now, those are potentially still generating those royalties. Alyssa, you touched on the global market. We also have a question in here about, you know, Elsa is in France, so affiliated with SASM, 50% of revenues coming from the US. So, you know, in addressing this question, but also with regard to the global publishing market just being, you know, big and growing, because, you know, digital stuff can go anywhere. It's not like physical, we have to ship it, right? How can an independent artist tap into the growth beyond their local market? But also, with regard to Elsa's question, is it, you know, best to rely on SASM as the foreign affiliate, you know, to the US market and their international agreements for those global collections? Like, is there a good way to handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on a couple different things. Like there are resources, like I said, like a publishing administrator who kind of aggregates all those things, right? And if you think about it in the context, or like an analogy, right, of distribution, we as TuneCore distribution will send things out to Spotify and Apple Music and all these different places. We do the same thing for publishing registrations directly. So while you may hear, you know, ASCAP, BMI, SASM, whoever has reciprocal agreements, like that may come up in conversation or panels where they tell you, okay, we have an agreement with partners in other territories to bring in those royalties that they collect, right? You can utilize your PRO for those performance royalties, but that's not going to cover the mechanical royalties. And might not cover some other kinds of royalties, like from YouTube or, you know, things that generate other kinds of royalties. So it's less comprehensive to rely on someone, and by someone I mean a, you know, pay source like the MLC or whatever, to do a job like that, or SASM, to keep it to the question, because their main task is to make sure that they are collecting performance royalties that come from that territory. So while that reciprocal agreement may be in place, it may be more effective in some situations for you to have a direct registration at several different, you know, PRO, CMOs, et cetera, all over the world, because you're able to like audit for the accuracy in a much easier way than you are if you were to go through a PRO to go then through someone else. If you use an administrator, whether it's us, Songtrust, Cobalt, UMPG, whoever, on a statement, you can see what that territory is, who collected it, what the usage period is, what the percentage is. Like there's all of these like tiny details that tell a story of where that money is coming from and who is doing the collecting. One of the other things I think that gets a little weedy, but important, especially for independent artists to understand, is these businesses take a percentage, right? It's very small, but they have operating costs. Like BMI has operating costs, SASM has operating costs. So there is like a small fraction of royalties that do get, or not royalties, but a percentage of revenue that comes and you know, goes toward that. So if your royalties are being commissioned in one company and then another company gets sent those royalties and then they take a commission on what they're doing, and then you have a, you know, it's just, if you're not interested in, or I should say it this way, if you're interested in maximizing your revenue, direct sources are the best way to do that. But it's frankly unsustainable to expect any artist to go and register at 240, 50, 60 different organizations. So having a partner, and there's so many automated solutions now that make it really easy, is, I think, advantageous to making more money,
Absolutely. I think there's also things that you can leverage if you look yourself up as an artist and you're looking on Chartmetric and it's telling you these are your top 10 territories that you are currently streaming in. Maybe those are the top 10 that you target in terms of having a direct affiliation in some form with whichever those territories are, or seeking somebody who can represent you in those territories, because globally there are sub-publishers everywhere. So it's something to consider. Aichelle, question directed to you. We're kind of looping back a little bit with trying to get everybody organized, right? Because it's not just about having yourself organized, right? If you're collaborating and you've got other songwriters who are in the room, how do you get everybody collectively organized? So let's say you're an artist and this, raising your hand and saying, let's put a split sheet together, and the other, people in the room have no idea what their IPI number is. Like, how do you empower those around you, your collaborators?
Money. You talk about they're missing the money. You're leaving money on the table. When people hear that, it's like their ears perk up. Wait a minute, how am I leaving money on the table? So in the split sheet that I use, I always encourage music artists to get, this might sound funny, but I always encourage them to get their government names, because most people only know their collaborators as their artist name. They have no clue what their government names is. So if you get their government names as you're going to register or give the producer credit, you can put their government names there. And if they don't have an IPI number or they're not set up, you should encourage. Most people don't really be trying to hear it because they think you're trying to take advantage of them. And then when they find out about it, it's like, oh, this is what you were saying. But I always encourage to get the government names. And I always encourage just to mention, hey, you leaving money on the table if you don't have this. And then that inspires people to go and see what you're talking about. So.
Absolutely. And it's great to put down both, get their government name and also get their professional name. Not that long ago, I spent a good 45 minutes trying to find someone's legal name, and it really shouldn't have taken me that long, because having found their legal name, when I went into their ASCAP profile was a different form of their legal name where they had included all of their middle names. And I was like, cool, that took me far too long to find. And I've been in this industry for nearly 25 years. So I know how to find people. And it's still surprisingly difficult sometimes. So you've got to leave those breadcrumbs. If you don't leave those breadcrumbs, it becomes increasingly difficult to find everything that is due to you. So is there a good time for an artist or a songwriter to consider bringing in help, to bring in a bookkeeper, an accountant, a publishing administrator, a business manager? Is there a time that any of you sort of recommend, or is it too early, too late? Is it never too late?
Yesterday. I don't think I think what maybe in the group, maybe able in the chat, I'd be interested if you're hesitating, is it maybe because you think you can't afford someone, or you don't think you're going to get the typical, you might not get a deal like, let's say, at a Sony or a Warner. Don't let any of that intimidate you. You have knowledge right here on this call. And I think one thing about these calls and Big Ass Kids putting this together is you need to share your information with others, because more than likely someone else on this call, if not everyone else, is going through what you're going through. So share the knowledge, share the information. Of course, I want to get compensated for what I do, as I'm sure Aichelle does, working consulting, and Alyssa. However, I'm not against saying, hey, I could help you with little things. I think your name is Raquel. You had a question on Monday about BMI, and I said, reach out to me. I could easily answer that. I help facilitate that with you. But for long term, or even just initially, even if you just say, hey, Aichelle, I want to have you for, help me out for a month or something, I'm sure there are things that can be worked out. But all that to say, if you don't know it, that's okay. What's that commercial? It's like, I stayed at a Best Western last night. Well, that doesn't mean you can perform surgery, but it also doesn't mean you know publishing. And it's okay to say you don't know it. We're learning together. Ask someone for help. It's only going to help you in the long run. Trust me. And educate yourself as much as you can. And then lastly, expectations. I just want to be clear. One thing I've noticed throughout my career as well, everyone thinks their song should be getting X number of dollars. And sometimes you're wrong. Not everybody's writing the next big thing. Not everybody's writing Halo, or not everybody's writing, you know, whatever. That's okay. But please give yourself expectations. And this is where education comes in. Don't think because you have 1 million streams, you're getting $1 million. That's not happening. And I'm just being very upfront and real, because sometimes pay sources don't take you seriously if you're going to send them what we call a claim and say, I'm due this. They're going to laugh. That's not it. But that's where education comes in as well. So yes, if you need help, closed mouths don't get fed. I highly suggest that you ask for it. There's too many people in this industry, many of which who are not working for these big companies, that are willing to help you out because they want to see you win.
100%. Alyssa, Aichelle?
Yeah, I'd love to add also, like, there are services, right, like a TuneCore or a Song Trust. It costs, you know, $75 to sign up. Also, anybody on this call, if you do want to sign up for TuneCore, hit me up. I'm happy to send you a code to sign up for free. But, you know, investing in that, making sure that, you know, if you are prepared for when your career does go in an upward trajectory, if you have the foundation, you have the thing set up already, it's a lot easier to plug that stuff in and get it going as you go, rather than backtracking and trying to get retroactive royalties and stuff, which we can still do, but like to varying degrees of success depending on the situation. The other thing that I wanted to add that I think is just helpful as like a point of context is that, like, the numbers, good luck finding like the 0.0004 whatever accurate number that is the current number of the month, because those change all the time. And generally speaking, say you make $100 in distribution, you should expect to see somewhere between, and holding, you know, all things constant, you own 100% of the sound recording, you own 100% of the composition. If you make $100 in distribution, you should expect somewhere in the realm of 15 to 20% for publishing, because of the way that the rates are set by the copyright board and such. So that's like a good, like, you know, rule of thumb. If you are looking at, you know, trying to like gauge, like, does this look right? You know, as you look at your statement, that's like a good kind of way to compare. So if you pull, right, like your distribution statement from your distributor, your label, whatever, and you hold that against the statement you get for publishing, you should see just about what that looks like. And again, it, you know, there are some variances with timing, because as we should know, publishing royalties come in on a much longer time frame than distribution royalties, so like that's a factor. But generally speaking, I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Aichelle, I know you had something to add.
Yeah, I just want to say, the question is, when should you bring in professional people? If you are an independent artist just starting out, I want to encourage you to press pause on finding a manager, because many things that you are able to do yourself, and many people, not all, but there are some people out here who will take you on as a client and take your money and do nothing for you, but just so that you can say you have a manager. So be mindful of those things, because right now in 2025, you can really do a lot of things on your own as an independent artist. You just have to be willing to put in the work.
100%. And I will say that even though all of us, you know, here on this panel who are talking today, we've got various things that, you know, we can do. Some things can be fairly basic, right? It doesn't have to be super fancy and crazy. It can be fairly basic. So, you know, I'll take, for example, something that I offer, which is literally just bringing everything together onto a sheet. And a lot of times the preference is Google Sheets, and that's fine. It is not some fancy subscription, but it is a way to get everything organized and put in things in one place, so that as you know, as your catalog of work, as you're projecting budgets, as you're dealing with revenue accounting and trying to wrangle things that are due to you, you have everything centralized into one place that you can reference and check against.
Can I say pivot table? I'm sorry, Alyssa, I was gonna say pivot tables are your friends.
And if
They
somebody
are
doesn't
your
know how to do a
friends.
pivot table, I will teach you.
Learn.
I will love a pivot table. Alyssa.
Yeah, we need a pivot table workshop. I was just gonna say too, I feel like gosh, so my like side hustle, the artist I work with, one of the things that I make sure we do is anytime that he has a new release, like as I was thinking about what I was going to say today, I was like, do I even say Google Sheets? It's so like, whatever. But you know what? If you're everyone who's starting, anyone who's like at those beginning stages, like there's nothing wrong with using a source that's available and free. So
Absolutely.
what I do with him is I lay out all the pieces of metadata across the sheet and we just add. So if there's ever a question that another artist comes to and the song was released 6 years ago, we can just cross-reference and say, oh yeah, here was the splits from then. So I think having literally just a Google Sheet, like something simple where you're, not paying a ton of time, a ton of attention, but like you have everything in one place, like that's such an important point because it's so overwhelming to try to like go across different places and put it to get after the fact. You know what I mean?
Yep, it does not have to be fancy. And it doesn't have to be another subscription. You don't have to sign up for yet another subscription that's take 15, 20 bucks a month out of your pocket, when you've got something like that is free. There's lots of other resources as well that are similar. So with this sort of financial organizing stuff in mind, there really is royalties, and this income is taxable, right? It's taxable income, and that is something that everybody should remember. So kind of as we were saying right at the very beginning, we're not tax professionals, we're not saying that, but what are some things to consider when you are looking at your output versus your input when it comes to revenue? Because I think a lot of people do forget to look at both. You have any advice or suggestions? And Google Sheets totally fine for that too. I've stunned you all into silence. Well, I'm just going to say for myself, I think it is important, right? It is important because we're thinking about it as a business. You are thinking about it as a CEO of your own, space, right? So yes, if you're spending money on your producer and your marketing and possibly, somebody to help you with your administration and stuff like that, those are all, business expenses or can be business expenses, right? And just in the same way as all the things that come in, your merchandise sales, your publishing revenue, all of those things, those are, potentially taxable revenue. So, something to consider. Aichelle, you have something to add?
No, I was just gonna say those things like the split sheets, your invoices, your copyright certificates, or the money you spent for that. All of everything, all of your documentations, just keep it all in one space. And when it's time, you could just take it to whoever your person is and say, I've been keeping a record. I have all the receipts. I think it's QuickBooks that allow you to take a photo of the receipts. Because if you like me, you have a little issue with losing receipts, but definitely keep track of everything and then, put it in a folder. And then when it's time for you to file your taxes, it'll all be there.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to add, as someone who launched my LLC just in July, I learned a lot to your point of business expenses versus personal expenses. I did something where I got a separate business account. I have Wells Fargo for business. I have Chase for my personal. I keep it separate. I did something as simple as, because I was using Chase at one point, I just loaded all of last year. And you'd be amazed what you spend money on for your business. Like I was like, oh, I bought a shredder. I bought pencils. Okay. Like you'll forget. You're going to forget. I forgot what I bought last week. So you can do things like that and just keep everything organized. And again, I know the people who are not so type A are probably cringing right now. But again, someone else can do that for you if you don't want to do it, but you should have it done. Because to Natalie's point, Aichelle and Alyssa, and I could tell personally, I could tell you, I won't tell you how much, but I got the best return this year. And a lot of that was because I was able to claim a lot of things from last year with launching Adagio. So again, it's just staying on top of your numbers, output and input. This is your passion. And again, I can't say it enough. You deserve to be properly compensated. So what would Lionel Richie do? Well, he would hire somebody. So
what would he do? That is a great question. And I'm also just going to address something that was happening in the chat, because I'm going to scroll back up and kind of look through the questions now so we can try and get as many of those answered before we finish. But it is an investment in yourself. Having somebody like, any of these lovely ladies help it is an investment in yourself. So it may seem like oh my gosh, that's money out of my pocket. I don't know if I can afford that. But really, the question is, can you afford not to? Right? If you spend even a couple $100 to buy, some kind of basic consultation or a template or something that you can use to get yourself organized, and that $200 allows you to find 2,500 or 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever it is that's possibly out there for you, then your ROI is multiples. So, just invest in yourself, right? Don't do it if you're like, you haven't done anything yet. You're like, what's there to capture? And you really like, I need, I haven't really released anything. That's still not actually the worst time to do it. It's getting yourself organized. However, like, just think of it as an investment in yourself and your future earnings. So, okay.
Can I also just add one tiny little thing? In addition to Google Sheets, they also have a templated thing that is just an expense tracker. I use that for my business. Like, I don't use any fancy tools. Like, I literally just input, output, and it puts it in a nice chart for you. You can export it. So if you keep your receipts in a shoebox and then you're just putting these line items in, it doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming task, and it doesn't have to cost a lot.
I was gonna say, that's what I sent to my accountant.
That's it.
Right. And I use an accountant because to Lisa's more, I don't know all the deductions that I can take for a business, but I do now because my accountant was like, did you do this? I work from home. Did you pay did you do
Your
your
security,
bill, your
your
sewage? Like
security.
literally, it's
Yeah.
amazing what you can pull.
ADT was on mine this year.
Absolutely. It's amazing
Yep.
what you can pull
Yep.
out, right?
Yeah,
So,
education too. So if you take a session or you go to a conference or like things like that to further your education, that's right offable. So
yep,
yeah.
absolutely. So use your money wisely and also collect it wisely, right? Okay, so I'm gonna scoot back up to a number of some really good questions that we've had going on in the chat during this time. Is there a recommended website, resource, directory where, somebody can access that money that's been left on the table? This is kind of a tricky one. So
It's not that simple.
yeah.
Again, I think Natalie brought up a good point where see where your songs are having the most exploitation, whether and across all the different form income types. And where there's a lot, right? There's digital, streaming, mechanical, streaming, performance, live, sing, commercial. See where when you get your statement where that you're getting money from, and I would work backwards and take it that way. So if I got something from TuneCore, to Alyssa's point earlier, and I see something from SASEM, I might say, wow, I got that money, but I think I should also get radio. Let me, dig into it that way. That's how I would suggest kind of start with what you have, and then it could kind of grow. That would be my suggestion. Because keep in mind too, every pay source is very different. I think someone hit upon this. The royalties type of income they pay could be different. When they pay it, what periods they're paying. Sometimes you can have a performance last year, you're not getting paid till first quarter. This year, there's every pay source has their calendar, their distribution calendar. You should know that and put one together. I have a cheat sheet myself. If you reach out to Adagio, I'll be happy to share it. But it tells you when you should be getting what. So again, that's also something. Hey, wait a minute. Saw some royalties came into TuneCore last quarter. I should get that next quarter. Let me keep an eye out for it. It's a lot of that as well. So that's how I would suggest handling it.
Absolutely. On my revenue tracker that I use for my clients as well, it actually says what's the distribution frequency, monthly, quarterly, annual, because they are all different. And also, you look at the formats that the statements come in, they're also all different because we don't like to make things easy in music. We're going to make it as hard as possible for you to track it down. But that doesn't mean it's impossible, and you shouldn't be discouraged by that. It's really you just have to kind of get used to the different sources and looking at each of them and how they present. Okay, so let me just scoot on a little bit. What is the difference between percentages between producers, songwriters, engineers? Is there a base percentage per role if you're splitting things up? Aichelle, you want to take that one?
I would definitely say negotiate. I know if you're working with a producer, oftentimes they have a fee in which they want, and then they also want a percentage on the back end. I would say negotiate. If you have a songwriter that you're working with, or you have background singers or session musicians, I would say negotiate. I will also say look into different agreements. There's work for hire agreements where you can pay them a one-time fee and then you take on ownership of everything that was created there. I would definitely say trust your gut, because sometimes people feel like they're giving engineers, because you engineered the song, I'm gonna give you a percentage. You're the producer, you get 100% of a song, and if you're giving away the majority of it, there's not going to be much for you to get royalties on. I mean, there will, but there's not going to be a lot. So I would say as much as you can retain of the song, do that.
Yeah, I get this question a lot too, and I think there is no like, this is what a songwriter should get, this is what a producer should get. Like, that is all up to you when you're in the studio, like talking to someone. So like, how much of the song did you write? You know what I mean? How much are you contributing? What feels fair? Some people will cut in like attorneys, you know, they'll give their attorney 4% in lieu of a, you know, retainer fee or, you know, whatever. So you can negotiate, to Aichelle's point, whatever you want, but keep in mind that other people will be doing that on their own behalf too. So there is no sort of like boilerplate like answer to like who should get what. But you have to be your own best advocate. And, you know, frankly, like from my perspective, like it makes sense to be fair. If like a producer is contributing in a writing perspective, like great, cut them in, or her in. But, you know, it really is up to you as the individual.
I will addendum to that though, is just make sure you're all in agreement. Because
True.
when you're not in agreement, then no money might come out. And that's something we haven't really touched on, but when it comes to conflicts, the standard policy for most agencies is that they will not pay until the conflict has been completely resolved. So if you're not in agreement, and let's say you're haggling over 5%, you might question whether or not it's worth continuing haggling over that 5%, or you're just gonna, you know, split it down the middle and at least let the royalties and other funds start flowing. I don't know if anyone's got any specific things they would like to say about that, but it can be a real killer, because that is a standard policy, is they don't pay until the conflict's resolved.
Yeah, can attest. I think the majority of sort of issues that we have, you know, if people are like, why am I not getting paid? It's because something is afoot, you know what I mean? So like if somebody has made an additional claim on the work for a percentage that doesn't match, if somebody is trying to collect your share because they don't understand that they are only supposed to collect their share. So like it can get hairy, you know, different people have different levels of understanding of what splits are. And also, not to be understated, like the ownership of the recording is different than the ownership of the composition. So when you're going to register a song at a PRO or, you know, with the administrator or whoever, make sure that you are clear that you all have the same understanding that we are talking about the songwriting, the composition, that asset, as opposed to the recording, where people say like, you may hear points on the master, right? Like people, like that's kind of the thing that gets thrown around. Points on the master has nothing to do with a composition. They're two entirely different assets that are managed differently. It's like having a car and, you know, a house. And, you know, you can't have car insurance for your house, right? Like they're two different things that have to be managed differently. So.
Right. And I will say one more plug for a split sheet here is, if a conflict does come up, but you all signed it and everybody's in agreement, you now literally have the receipts that you can hand somebody and be like, look, we all signed this. If they're having their own moment now, you know, that's a different thing, but this is what is on record. And it was agreed upon by everybody. So the sooner you can get that in place, the better. So Lake has a sort of a great add-on to that. What about songs made in the past that have never discussed with any of the collaborators before? Can he go back and negotiate those now?
I would say yes. Depending on what the song has actually done, you have to be prepared, because there might be a different conversation right now. Whereas before, where it was just like, oh, we don't really know what this song is going to do. But now, if the song is done crazy numbers on TikTok or Spotify, or it's just picking up traction, there's a different negotiation right now.
It's still worth negotiating though. I don't think that's a don't do it. Don't forget about it because again, if you're not claiming it, you're not claiming it consistently, probably nobody's getting paid. So if you want to release those funds, have the conversation, just potentially be prepared for a slightly different discussion.
Yeah, that's another thing that I was gonna say is that oftentimes music artists work together and they be in the studio, pay for the sessions and all of those things, but nobody actually goes to register the music. So it's important. That's why I say get a split sheet where you're there, even if they don't have an IPI number, you can go and on your end go and make sure that the song gets registered so you can get the royalties or whatever is going to come to you.
Absolutely. So let me just hold on. There's another question here. I lost it. I scrolled past it. Hold on. So when it comes to split sheets and producer agreements, if a label exec from an artist, if a label exec might reach out to request beats from a producer, when should the paperwork be sent? Like, is that when the beats are sent over in tandem with the music? Is there any recommendation when it comes to sending over paperwork?
ASAP.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's simple, right? Like the quicker you come to an agreement, the quicker you have it on paper, like the easier it is to not have to think about it anymore. I think it is kind of unsexy to walk into a studio and just be like, hey man, Lisa, this gone. You know what I mean? But it doesn't have to always be so stuffy. Like you can have an email exchange, right? You know, a signature on a document is much better, right? But in the 2025 reality we live in, if that's not something that is feasible for you, get an email going, get a text thread, take screenshots, they're timestamped. You can bring that, into a conversation and say, well, this is what we agreed upon. You can reference those things. So there's one best way to do a split sheet, but there's not just one way to do a split sheet, so to speak.
Absolutely. So Jared's, I'm just looking at the time as well. Jared's put a nice summary in here, and I'll let you ladies confirm and add on to anything that he has noted here. So in summary, the best practice is to double check your statements from PROs and distributors, follow up with admin to make sure full payouts have been made. Is that the size of it? And Jared, thank you for that very concise summary. Are there any final thoughts that this group would like to add?
I mean, that's a great summary, but unfortunately, it's not that simple. For this purposes, all intent purposes, yes. But also, you need to have that person who's going to be able, if there are issues, who have an in and have that network and are going to be like, if you tell me, for example, Raquel mentioned something about BMI. I know somebody, I know BMI. I could call someone specifically at BMI and get an answer for you. You might not have that same thing. Your administrator may, but you may not. So it's not so easy as that. However, yes, Jared, it's the beginning of it. It's the bare bones of it. What you summarize, in my opinion, is the blueprint of it. It's a start, and then you can kind of decide where you need to go from there, whether that is because you may not need to contact the pay source. You may think everything's okay, or you may want to wait a couple of distribution periods and say, let me compare. That's something I also put in. I want to suggest that as well. Compare your statements from every time you get a statement, compare how much it is. Start doing what we call in the industry a gap analysis. See if you got paid from ASCAP, but you didn't get paid from your label, or you didn't get paid from MLC. And you'll also be able, in those instances, identify any gaps and possible underreportings or no reporting at all. So to answer your question, yes, that's a start. But when it's time to do more of the heavy lifting, that's where you may have to rely on an administrator or someone else to help you with that.
Yep. And it's great too, as well, to add on to that, Lisa, I think to just consider if a song has been on an upward trajectory and then suddenly you don't get paid the following month and you're like, I got paid $3,000 and now suddenly I got paid nothing. Like what happened there? Did it accidentally get taken down somehow? Was there some other problem? Was there a conflict claim submitted that perhaps you weren't aware of? Those are great questions, and that's where the pivot table comes in, because you can do it by your songs. But anyway, Alyssa, what do you think?
Yeah, this is kind of more broad strokes, but I think in the market that is what it is, like we talk about saturation all the time. There's a lot of music out there. There's this, there's that, and that can feel really daunting. But my advice for anybody who's an artist is think of other artists as collaborators, not competition. You all have different things to offer. You're not going to have the same product, right? Like if you were selling fruit, like, you know, somebody might be selling bananas, you might be selling oranges, you don't know. So, what I mean by that in this context is ask people that you respect who they work with, what they like, what they don't, what's worked well for them, what resources they have. Are you able to offer resources in exchange? Like that doesn't have to be a transactional conversation. It can be very natural, and it's a way that you build the community around you that is able to support your growth, and then actively participate in that community. Like, what is it that you have to offer? Oh, I know a guy who does bookings for new artists over here. You should talk to him. All of that collaboration is going to move everybody forward. There's no reason to gatekeep. There's no reason to think that people are, you know, out to get you. Like, assume positive intent most of the time. But if something feels weird, run. But yeah, I think of other artists as your community and not as competition, because I think you'll learn more. You'll get more access to things. Like that's what it's all about, you know.
Amazing. Aichelle, any final words?
Yes. Always negotiate. Always get everything in writing. And when in doubt, ask. When in doubt,
Absolutely.
ask.
That is a great piece of advice. So we are at time. We're actually a minute over. Thank you so much to Alyssa, Aichelle, Lisa. You've been amazing with such a wealth of information today. And for everybody who's been on this publishing week journey with us, like honestly, thank you so much. It's been so much fun. I am such a nerd that loves talking about all of this stuff. So it's my life. I live it and breathe it. So thank you everybody for joining and participating and come up with some great questions too. Carolyn, I turn over to you.
Thank you so much for hosting Pub Week, for bringing us this great information. You're amazing. Natalie, I can't champion you enough. And panelists, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you guys, like Natalie said, for joining us all week. I really hope I see you guys in the playground and we continue building with you and supporting you. And if there's ever anything I can do to help support your music career, please, I'm just one DM or email away. Thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.